I have decided to start doing TBRs on this channel so I can get back on the rails. And so here's the September TBR for 2024. It's a bit aggressive for September, but I really do feel like I can pull this off, or at least I'm going to give it a gosh darn try. And it is just past midnight on September 2nd now. So I am including yesterday in this because I compiled this list when I had already started reading A Spell for a Chameleon, which I ended up talking about on the previous video I uploaded, tied to the story behind the thrift shop hauls that I did like 30 years ago, and I'm going to be hunting down more of these. Now, I said that in that video before I had cracked into this. I thought I had already, like 30 years ago, I read like maybe 3 or 4 chapters or whatever I said. That is not the case. I very likely read the first chapter and I didn't go past that. From chapter 2 onward, and I don't want to belabor this point because it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and this should be a review video if I'm going to do it. It sexualizes every woman that the main character Bink runs into, to the point where it gets hard to ignore. And it was kind of like, it's kind of amusing if you put it into context of like, it's kind of like a hee moments, right? And then you get to chapter 3 or 4, I forget when it was, I think it's 3, and things get uncomfortable like pretty fast. There's definitely one specific line in here that sexualizes the body of a 14-year-old, and the main character is quarter-century old, 25, and that's where I was like, okay, wait, what? I mean, I actually had to look up the age of consent in 1977 when this book was written. That's how uncomfortable it made me for that chapter, because then I was like, wait, is this for young readers or not? Right? Because like part of me is like, it's got mature themes in it, but it's written as if it's for 10-year-olds. It puts it in a really strange place, where I feel like if you were very young when you read this, maybe some of that stuff was like tee-hee-hee stuff, like as an adolescent boy especially. But go back and read it as an adult. I highly like it. Would I recommend this for people who have modern sensibilities and they kind of triggered by things like that? I mean, no, I actually wouldn't recommend this. If you can separate that and kind of read, like I'm a fan of understanding the history of literary development through the centuries, university courses and stuff like that. So I understand where that context makes sense. This one made me question things, but I read things like Best Novel of the Year, British Fantasy Society, and it makes me wonder like if these things are getting awards, and they've lasted for decades, you know what I mean? But it just makes me question awards at this point. Some of the phrasing in here and the over-sexualization of every female in almost every chapter that Bink runs into, it got so overwhelming to a point where I was like, I'm not sure how this won an award, but it's obviously like of its time. It doesn't really feel like that fits for this. I'm not sure. Look, I don't want to go. This is a TBR. I don't want to derail here. This really should have been a review video, and I was going to do one, but then I was like, I think it's going like I just didn't know how to approach it. That's all. And I did finish this. Like I started reading this immediately after uploading that thrift video, and this morning, and I finished it in less than 24 hours. So I was like, you know what, I can probably do another one. So I'm gonna put book 2 on the list here. As you can see, I've already done chapter 1. I'm going to be reading this one, which is a direct continuation to a Spell for Chameleon. Kind of like I'm in the groove right now, and I know the characters, right? So it's easier for me to kind of get right into it and run on through. We'll see if maybe the writing has toned down, and I mean by toned down, I mean like by 95%. Some of the misogynistic kind of language that it uses in the prose. I mean, it's overwhelming. Anyways, not to belabor, I did it again. I'm going to jump into the third book as well, Castle Rugna, because this plays a part in the first book. It's a chapter, and we learn about Castle Rugna, and I feel like there's some cool development that could happen here that I'm kind of curious to learn more about. First book might have thrown me off, but at the same time, like the world that this takes place in, the land of Xanth and Mundania, and it's almost like it's so simple that it can be clever, and if you're not a fan of puns, then you're probably really not gonna like it, because it's like dad joke humor all the way through, with some of the wordplay, and it was done a few times in A Spell for Chameleon, but I can see it kind of pushing on that and making more of that. Yeah, that's the way I would put it, like dad jokes sometimes inside the prose, but like not as humor, but grounded, but like they do it in, anyways, it's part of the lore itself, is this kind of silly way of using language in the narrative and stuff like that. Again, this could be a whole video where maybe I break this down. Maybe if I read more of these, I'll get some more context. The point is, I'm going to do book 3, and then I'm going to also jump into Centaur Isle. I know that centaurs play a big part in the lore of the land, and also this really has to be its own episode, but like you learn which could make you uncomfortable if you apply modern sensibilities to what I'm about to say. But part of the lore of this world, the foundation of the lore of this world, is that all the breeds that are like half humans, use your imagination. It's evolutionary. It's not so much purely magical like centaurs breeding centaurs. Use your imagination of what I mean by that. But any kind of hybrid creatures actually happen because of evolution, unnatural unions, if you will. Let's just listen. It's mythology. I mean, the Greek myths have it, and no one really brings this up and talks about it in the Greek myths. And I think it's just like in a disturbing way. It's not like the character like accepted that was the history of the world, even in the book one, right? But in a disturbing way, you kind of like it grounds even that idea, and that becomes intriguing to me. Because it doesn't pull the punches on it. It's just like, that's the lore. That's how it happened. And Xanth is so magical that happened in Xanth allowed for things like centaurs and minotaurs and sphinxes and griffins. You know, that'd be like an eagle banging a lion. You get what I'm saying, okay? That's the point. So that is I'm going to go for 4 books in the world of Xanth, but that's not it. That's not the aggressive part, because I did finish the first book in less than 24 hours. It is a long weekend here. I'll probably finish the second book by tomorrow, but then the work week starts, and so things are going to slow down. So I picked a couple small books. Because I'm in this like thrift hunt mode, and I'm unpacking boxes. I found 2 more that are printed by Pan Books. And so here's the first one, The Island of Dr. Moreau. Now, I'm very familiar with these stories because I'm a big fan of Gothic horror, but I've kind of absorb these stories in different ways, almost by like proxy stories that are influenced or inspired by these concepts from Gothic lore, but they're done in their own settings or world or something like that. Like if you're familiar with Ravenloft setting from the early 90s, it was a tabletop game from Dungeons and Dragons. There was a bunch of novels printed, domain lords inside this fictional realm. The domain lords were mapped to the old famous Gothic horror kind of IPs. I think, was it Val Kilmer movie? I forget. There was like decades ago. It's like, I remember watching a movie and I actually didn't mind it, but I don't think it was that famous, but I ended up buying it, a DVD of it at some point, and I was like, it was kind of neat. It was kind of like, it wasn't quite a B movie. Was it Val Kilmer in there? Am I crazy? Anyways, the point is, Island of Dr. Moreau. Look, it's very thin. And so part of me wonders if this is like a truncated version. It's 142 pages. It's really not that big. Oh yeah, look. It's like it actually shows the pictures. Like, that's what I mean. It's like, it was, maybe if I rewatched it, it wouldn't land as well. I don't think that's Val Kilmer. Look, I don't know. Look, okay, I'm going to be reading The Island of Dr. Moreau. And not only that, this Pan logo up here makes me want to go to the thrift shop and try to find more in this series, because I also have this one in my collection. The Hound of Bakersville. Again, I'm familiar with the story. I've read like parts of the story or things inspired by the story. The first Witcher game, I played it, there was the hounds in there, and so I feel like that was inspired by this. It was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and what the hell? Oh my gosh. I have this was bought at a thrift shop, but like this was in it. I'm not sure where this is from, but it might be, maybe someone was using it as a bookmark. Awkward. But okay, so it's 200 pages. This one's worn. This one's these are red. Like these are the kind of pulp books that I expect to see. You know, like well worn. Like you put them in your back pocket and you take them around and you like really read the crap out of them. It also doesn't make me feel guilty about doing this kind of stuff to the book. I really take care of my books, but there's something to be said about thrift books that, like, you know, I could do this to it and go, I mean, I'll buy another one if I really like it, or if I want to. I want to find more of these Pan books to see if there's any more that I can kind of collect. Okay, now, another one that I started, but I didn't finish, and because I keep getting distracted, is Dracula. Of course I'm familiar with Dracula. I do recall reading this when I was maybe 16. I mean, am I really going to be spoiling this? I don't want to. So, anyways, Jonathan Harper, if you know the story, you know the story. At the end of chapter 4, Jonathan Harper, the thing happens, and then I believe it switches perspectives to Mina Harper, and then we basically get the rest of the Dracula tale, which, again, I strangely enough, like, I'm familiar with all the different parts that happen in this, but I don't remember how the novel itself presents it. I just don't remember. So I'm looking forward to finishing Dracula, and it's pretty hefty. It's over 500 pages in this, 600 pages in this book right here. But I feel like I can do it because I'm sort of familiar with the story, so maybe I'll get through it. Like I said, kind of aggressive because I just unpacked Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like, this is another one. Of course I'm familiar with Frankenstein. I've watched a couple different versions of movies of this, but I've never read the book. I thought I would have gotten this in one of my courses back in university. I didn't end up getting that particular course. I mean, I likely bought this at the thrift shop at some point. I was collecting Gothic horror books whenever I found them. So this was very likely a purchase here, but I mean, it's still really good condition, like straightish pages, not really yellowed, only a couple like dings, and just a minor crease in the spine. But yeah, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I really want to read this, and so I figure why not add it to the stack. And this might be the one where I risk having to push into October, and I just realized I could have just pushed a bunch of these horror novels into October. I made it a horror month. And so maybe that's what I'll do. In any case, I'm going to give this a shot at the end of the month. And there's only one more book which I really need to read because I'm kind of like, I started it again. I might have read 2 or 3 of the stories in this, and it's the Dragon Age to Winter Nights. Dragon Age 4 is going to be launching soon. I would love to be playing it. Maybe not right at launch, but slightly after launch. I'm a really big fan of the Dragon Age world, the Dragon Age setting, the characters, the entire world building that's gone on in the games, in the art books, in the novels. Read all of them, enjoyed all of it, and this was actually, it was good. I mean, but I read this before I moved 2 years ago to this house, and that bookmark is still in there. So I would like to finish this because I really feel like this is going to be maybe between the second book of Xanth and the third book. I'll switch it to Winter Nights and I'll see where I go from there. This is very aggressive. I mean, that's about 3 books a week. I'm going to see how it goes, and then I'll throttle myself a little bit when it cuts into October and onward. But I do feel like I want to get a bit of a cadence going in this channel because I've got some ideas I really want to bring to the channel now that things are settling down. I do have to organize my shelf still, but I would like to get back into these manga here. There's a series I'd like to do, and I'd like to get a setup done for that by October, and then we'll see. I would like to jump into some Brandon Sanderson, and I got an idea that I want to do for Brandon Sanderson books, but I need to return to the manga here first to see how I'm actually going to produce it, because I'd like to return to this idea I had like 4 years ago where it's basically reaction videos but for reading. It's kind of like a reading vlog reaction, but then I also threw in analysis, and I feel like that's maybe where I made it too bloated, and I'd like to try to bring all that back and really turn it into like focusing on just the experience of reading. It's probably inevitable that I will do some mild analysis along the way, and it'll be like a deep dive into the experience. And so while I'm reacting to things happening in the book, you would be seeing my reaction, and then how I produce it is I need to streamline this. I need to trim them down. I just uploaded some of the older video attempts that I did on this to the channel so that if folks need to see like the progression of that idea, I want to land it somewhere so that I can replicate that process more consistently. So it'll be carved up like by chapter or something like that. So these would be hefty. I would like to make it more like a reading experience where if someone wants to even follow along, for rereads for all of you who might have already read it, because I'm obviously going to be spoiling along the way, but I don't want to be spoiled. But the idea would be that you could follow along relatively easy, or if you're not reading, you could be speed reading and then just seeing like what parts are coming up, which ones I'm going to react to, stuff like that. And I'll see if I can do something with that. I'm just going to get back into reading first though. So September is about just warming myself back up, and then we'll see what happens from October onward, and yeah, we'll go from there. Cool. Thanks for showing up. Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire, buddy. Peace.